Welcome, Pisces, to the month of June 2018. I'm Megan of North Star Astrology, and this is another general transits reading for those of you born with your sun, moon, and or rising signs in the 12th and final zodiacal sign of Pisces the fish, or otherwise known as two fish swimming in opposite directions, and a dual sign. So now the month starts out with the moon in Capricorn in your 11th house of friendships, goals, and wishes. And then on June 2nd, the moon conjuncts Pluto, also here in your 11th house in Capricorn, at 22 hours and 7 minutes. Sidereal time, or I guess military time in this sense. And what this does for you is makes you feel a deep emotional connection with friends and group activities. Then on June 4th, Jupiter then squares the moon when the moon goes into your 12th house of dreams and the subconscious mind, and squares each other here from the 9th to the 12th. This 90-degree angle gives you the emotional drive to forge forth in a big way, as this is wonderful to have the ruling planet of Sagittarius and Sagittarian's house in, well, not necessarily Sagittarius, because it's in Scorpio, your sister sign. And wow, this will just I'm not even affected by Mercury retrograde, but yet I don't know. Never mind on that one. But it's there's a good, see, the way I see squares is it's not necessarily an obstacle, but for the Piscean, like myself as well, it can give us the internal drive that we very much need, and or impetus to do things that we normally wouldn't take chances on and assert ourselves. Then on June 6th, the last quarter moon happens in the first house of the self and body in Pisces at 15 degrees Pisces, 60 minutes. And with that comes a trine, a very harmonious energy from the first house to the 5th house, the trine being moon in Pisces to Venus in Cancer. And the 5th house deals with romance and creativity, and having Venus transiting this house, I have it natally by chance, but having Venus transiting the 5th house of romance and creativity, you may very well come across as beautiful, somewhat elusive, mysterious, and spiritual, depending on who you're associating with. Say if you're in a church gathering or something, then you'd be seen as very spiritual. And so there's that. And then on June 9th, once the moon goes into your second house of money and what you value, it then proceeds to square Venus in the fifth house. So from the fifth to the second houses, you now have, maybe you may have a tendency to overspend on romance, if indeed that is what you have in your life at the moment. So moon in the fiery sign of Aries, square to a 90-degree angle to Venus in Cancer. Notice how both are cardinal signs. Cardinal water, cardinal fire. And so this is why there's a square. And the square, like I said, can maybe give you that tendency to overspend. So you may want to hold on to the, tighten those purse strings. Then on June 12th, the very first planetary ingress happens when Mercury leaves your fourth house of the home and enters Cancer into your fifth house of romance and creativity again. And so now here you'll have a very harmonious way of speaking, very melodiously, in fact, especially with this romantic placement with Mercury and Venus transiting your fifth house. Then the moon sextiles Venus once the moon goes into your third house of communications, into Taurus, and then sextiles, meaning a 60-degree orb or flow of energy, meaning 2 signs away. So earth to water. So earth and water will give you this very pleasant ability to emotionally communicate with your potential significant other, as well as the possibility of doing something very creative in your life, artistically or musically, whichever it may be. Then the following day, the second planetary ingress happens when the planet Venus leaves Cancer and enters Leo in your sixth house of health and work. So you'll have more of a love for what you're doing work-wise, and or love how your health is improving, as well as any kind of service you're giving. You are going to be giving, but just be sure to not deceive yourself, as Neptune in the first house can often make Pisces very self-deceptive, as well as being deceived by others. So here, just be careful. Not that that's an opposition or anything, but I'm just saying there's a tendency to overdo work-wise. Then on June 13th as well, the moon goes into your fourth house of the home and conjuncts the sun, as well as becoming a new moon. So there are new changes possibly taking place within the home, or a possible new home or a new move for those of you that it might apply to. And then on June 15th, probably the only opposition of the month, is when Pluto opposes the moon. Once the moon comes into your 5th house of romance and creativity, and there's Pluto over there in your 11th house. So with this 180-degree opposition, like I always like to refer to it as a point of awareness, you now have the awareness that you emotionally communicate in such a feeling way that you might have a tendency to possibly manipulate friends but not in a bad way. Well, maybe, but emotionally communicate, possibly in a very positively transformational way. In other words, I feel that most of us Pisces are realizing that our old ways are old school and didn't work for us before. So now, this might very well be your ability to make new what was during the new moon, which is waning toward this moon, and then this moon placement in your 5th house. So given that it's a 180-degree aspect from the moon to Pluto, which is the furthest planet out, this gives us the intuitive awareness that what we were doing isn't working for us, and now we can change that. But how we change that is a whole nother ball game, so I'm going to try to figure out how we can change that. Okay, and then on June 20th, the first quarter moon happens in your 6th house of work and health at 29 degrees, or maybe it's here, 29 degrees Virgo, the 7th house. The first quarter moon happens in our 7th house of relationships. So 29 degrees Virgo, 4 minutes. Before it then proceeds to square the sun in Gemini. So here we have, once again, here's an interesting square between, instead of cardinal signs, mutable signs, since this is the second quadrant of the pi wedge. Mutable air, mutable earth. And I apologize if you hear that really loud noise. That's the air conditioner that just went off, thank goodness. But we do need some more of that. Okay, then on June 21st, the longest day of the year, or summer equinox, the sun leaves Gemini and enters Cancer into your 5th house of the house of romance and creativity. I almost said the 5th house of the home. I mean, leaving your 4th house of the home and entering your 5th house of romance and creativity, okay? And so with this, you have even more of an ability to highlight a new or possible energy, pleasant energy going into the 5th house of romance and creativity. And that could even be, if you're a male watching this, this is also the house of sports. and or sporting events. Excuse me. Then on June 22nd, Pluto squares the moon. Once the moon goes into your 8th house of other people's resources in Libra. And this square from the 8th to the 11th houses, Pluto square the moon, gives you that little bit of tension, enough tension to make it work, but to ask friends for some sort of resources, financially and otherwise. Then on June 24th, Mercury trines the moon. When the moon goes into your 9th house in Scorpio, and Mercury here in your 5th house, so from the 9th to the 5th houses, and Mercury in the water sign of Cancer, and Jupiter in the water sign of Scorpio, now you have a very pleasant ability to communicate in or with foreign lands if you're traveling, and this could be a very harmonious long-distance journey or vacation. Then on June 26th, your ruling planet Neptune squares the moon when the moon goes into your 10th house of career and public standing in Sagittarius, the other mutable sign, this time mutable fire. And Pisces, you're mutable water, meaning changeable, flexible. And with this moon square Neptune from your 1st to your 10th houses, you will have a bit of a challenge, but not in a bad way. Just know that this is what you need for your career, coming or stemming from your ruling planet now, which is in Pisces. You have the edge in hopefully garnering support in your career sector. Then finally, on June 28th, the moon comes full circle back into Capricorn, becoming a full moon in your 11th house of friendships at 6 degrees 28 minutes on June 28th, which creates the figurative opposition, as anyone born with their sun opposing their moon. I have a sextile because my moon's in Taurus and I'm a Pisces, so my moon's here and my sun is here. So that's a sextile. However, it's in the earlier part, early something to do with that. Yeah, that's what I was told anyways, sextile. Anyway, this is yet another opportunity in a big way to voice your emotional self. Bring out your emotional self to highlight and illuminate and highlight and illuminate and woo, and maybe asking your friends if they know of anybody, if you don't have a romantic partner yet. And that's where I'm feeling at this point in my life. Although I'm doing fine without a relationship yet. Okay, then finally on June 29th, Mercury this is the fourth and final planetary ingress. Mercury leaves your 5th house and goes into your 6th house of work and service given and health. And you will more than likely talk about your health and your work. And that happens on June 29th. And then there is a conjunction at the very end of the month with the moon, the full moon conjuncting Pluto on the 29th as well. So there's definitely a lot of transformation within group events, friendships, work. Things are changing, hopefully for the better. And with that, Pisces, I want to thank you for watching, liking, give me a thumbs up, comment down below, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in July.